Privileged to introduce our keynote speaker, Kevin Sabet, an affiliate of the Institution of Social and Drug Politics, and by Salon as the quarterback of the new anti-drug movement. He's an author, consultant, and was an advisor to 3 U.S. presidential administrations. He is the only person appointed by a Republican and Democrat to work at the White House Drug Office. And Kevin is currently the president and CEO of the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions and SAM, the Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which are 2 nonprofit organizations he founded with Congressman Patrick Kennedy. I will also say his latest book, Smokescreen, with What the Marijuana Industry doesn't want you to know, was distributed by Simon & Schuster and won the Next Generation Indie Book Award in the social justice category, and has been optioned for a documentary film. And his upcoming book, One Nation Under the Influence, will be published by Polity in 2025. I present to you Kevin Sabet.
Good morning, everyone. Happy 50th birthday. How's that? Amazing. That's awesome. How many of you were here in Orlando with us last year? You know who deserves a round of applause from there? The air conditioning. You remember that? We were August in Florida and they broke the AC, but we had a great time. Now we're cold, but I'll take that. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Kevin Sabet, and though I am not a person, and one of the few up here and in this room, not a person in long-term recovery, I wake up talking to policymakers every day, inspired by you and the 40 million people in recovery in this country. And I will be damned if I let them tell me that recovery isn't real, that 12-step doesn't work, that we don't need more sober housing, and that we need drug maintenance or a clean needle instead of real recovery, right? So I promise you that. And I know who's looking down upon us from way up on high. Most of us are really down low, so we're looking far away. But our wonderful, incredible founder, Paul Malloy, who we remember every day, and of course his wife and children, of course, that are here, and we're honored to have them, and I'm honored to be part of this adopted family. As you heard, I'm president and CEO of SAM. Some of you know that organization, and the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions. I come to you not only as an admirer of your work, but someone who wrestles with this and has wrestled with these issues for decades. And I've come to the kind of not that difficult conclusion, but it seems to be difficult to implement, which is a very simple thing. We simply need to make help easier to get than drugs in this country. That's all we need to do. It's very simple. And I went to the other Oxford. It took me 10 years to get a PhD to come up with that, but you knew that from your Oxford, which is much better and probably a little bit cheaper, maybe not. Bill Clinton, I was honored to do that, and then working at the Bush White House, and then for President Obama for the longest time. This was back at a time, ancient history, when you could work for both parties. It wasn't seen as heretical, because this is not a partisan issue. This should never be a partisan issue. And, you know, unfortunately, it's become that. The environment's become harder to do this work. It reminds me, when I was back at Berkeley, I had a group called, some of you know, Citizens for a Drug-Free Berkeley. I know, it was hard. It was about as hard as the Coalition for a Wine-Free France. So we know what it is to have challenges, right? I'm fortunate enough, I'm blessed to be sort of working alongside some of the leading minds in addiction science, and I know you all know the name, and you're going to hear tomorrow from Representative Patrick Kennedy, who, let's give him a round of applause already, one of the greatest fighters for mental health and addiction in this country, came up with the, once again, obvious, but I guess in this city, it's rocket science to tell somebody that the brain is an actual part of the body and should be treated as such when you're a health insurance company. That the brain is not some other thing that isn't directly related to physical health. That's what Patrick taught us. We're honored, but I'm also honored to be joined here in the room by many people. My colleague from ONDCP, Peter, thank you so much, and Delegate Lewis as well. Barbara, your work's been inspiring. We were lucky enough to have her as our speaker at our annual summit, which is in this very, I was going to say room, but complex compound, I guess as the Kennedys said, this is a compound, that we do in February alongside our very good friends, CADCA, Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, which also deserve a huge round of applause because they're on the front lines doing prevention, because we would actually prefer, and I think you would too, not to have addiction in this country. I hate to say it, we want to put Oxford House out of business in some ways. Right? Because we want to prevent this from starting. And we're so lucky that it's led by a gentleman who's actually here with us and took time to be with us, General Barry Price. General Price, if you don't mind standing for everyone to see you, he's on the front lines leading 4,000 coalitions, thousands and thousands of coalitions around the country. It's actually where I got my start when I was 14 years old. It was with one of these very coalitions. And what I've learned, something actually from Patrick and doing this work with General Price and others, I think can best be summed up by the quote that not only says meet people where they're at, which we want to do, of course we want to do that, but we don't want to leave them there. That's what we're about. Meeting people where they're at and helping them go to a new place. That's it. That's the idea, and that's really the inspiration of our foundation. It's what we put together, something called the Hyannis Consensus, which is a blueprint of effective drug policy. And again, it's very simple. It's, again, cheer if you agree with this. It's a culture of prevention in this country and a climate of recovery. That's it. That's what we want to do. And that's what we're trying to do in every community, and that's really why I'm here. I've learned the most powerful solutions don't come from Washington, and I've been here a lot. They're coming from communities like yours, and that's why Oxford House is so inspirational. Nothing compares to a room with people who are proof, living proof, that recovery works. That's what's incredible about addiction. We talk about addiction as a disease, which it is, but it's very different than other diseases in many ways. And the number one way it's different, the biggest thing why it's different. It's different because addiction is the only disease where you're a better person after you've overcome it than you are before. You went through something that has completely transformed you to become a person, as we say, living a life beyond your wildest dreams. But it's not just about your life. It's about the way you're able to contribute to society in ways you never were, even before you took that very first drug. And I thank you for that. There is really nothing like, and I've seen it many times, a mother's face when she sees her child come home from a sober home. The pride in a father's voice when he tells his kids he's been clean for one more day. That's the kind of inspiration that everyone in this town needs to learn from. It's what I'm trying to still learn from, and why these voices matter. And I was reading about so many of your great alumni. There's so many in this book. But I'm reminded of some of them, like Kathleen Hunter from Alabama. I don't know if Kathleen's here. She relapsed after 9 months of sobriety, and we know that that's often part of the process. But she lost her job, left her children with a man she thought she could trust. She was doing things she never would have done if her brain wasn't hijacked, which is what happens. Your brain is hijacked. Your brain, as Bob DuPont, the great Bob DuPont, the founder of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, says, your brain is the most selfish organ in the body. It's wanting to do things that you shouldn't do. I had a second croissant this morning. That was my brain. But there's a difference between croissants and other things that actually affect in greater ways the people around you. And that's what happened to Kathleen. It was leaving her kids with someone that was a predator. She realized that she had to surrender. Begged God to save her child and promised she would never use again. And after rehab, she found Oxford House. That's exactly what did save her. And so many other people. It's really about second chances. It's about a radical commitment to sobriety. And it's where the word family, I've learned, is a verb. It's rides to work, a chair saved at a meeting, as you know, a lights on budget, a vote of confidence, and sometimes a hard vote to protect your house. And I know you have to do that. It's that second chance that I think our society talks about a lot. We throw that around a lot. We even have a piece of legislation actually know often what that really means or put it in practice. But that's what Oxford House is doing every day. That's why it's a simple model, but it is a radical one that we need to bring to scale all around the world, not just in this country. This is a global disease. And you're doing that, and that's what's so awesome about the global work that you all do. You're not only nationally recognized, but also global. The really interesting thing about Oxford House that I was always inspired by with Paul is that it wasn't started in a boardroom. It started organically. You know, in 1975, while staying at his halfway house, he told me this story many times, in Silver Spring, right up the road, that halfway house lost funding. And Paul and his friends got together and said, we're going to do something different. We're going to have democracy at the kitchen table. We're going to talk about sober living, shared responsibility, and that is how this movement grew. The fact that there are thousands and thousands of these Oxford houses are incredible. We also have to give credit to the legislators that have done a good job. We hear a lot about failed drug policies in the past, and absolutely many of them have failed. But maybe few people know that 1988 Anti-Drug Abuse Act that people always wanted to beat up former President Biden about for supporting as senator, and not all of it was good, by the way, but a lot of it was good. And what actually, not only Senator Biden, but people like John Dingell and Democrat, but also Republican, like Representative Madigan from Illinois, they ensconced Oxford House in 1988 in that very piece of legislation, which actually helped fund the whole movement. So we need to give our forefathers a round of applause as well, and our foremothers, because it's easy to, criticize in hindsight. And we should. There are things to criticize. We should be critical. But we should also recognize the good that's which is pretty simple. We build communities. We want to see community by community. We want to see recovery-ready and recovery-based community, not addiction for profit industries, which is unfortunately where a lot of our country is going. And I'll talk about that in a minute. It means we deeply believe in the work you all do as we fight every day. And I want to give my staff, many of whom are here, a round of applause as well. I want them to stand up. You may not know who they are, but they're doing incredible work on your behalf every single day, including our head of communications, Derek Robinson, an Oxford House graduate. Alumna. So I talked about addiction for profit. We do that very well in this country. And we do a lot of great things well, but we do a lot of bad things well, unfortunately. You can read the headlines from the last couple days about some of the bad things we do well. It seems all too often. But one of those bad things is the addiction industrial complex. And the president has been talking about a certain issue. He has a way of grabbing attention, I guess they say. But one of the issues, that issue is marijuana, because he's going to be making a decision very soon. Maybe I'll be booed off the stage for saying this, but I think marijuana is America's most misunderstood drug and one of the most dangerous because of that misunderstanding. We have fallen into a lazy, false dichotomy that we need to get out of. And that false dichotomy, which is obviously is false, it's wrong, says that our only choices are locking people up, criminalizing them, or having, Joe Camel for weed, posters everywhere, weed shops everywhere that are threatening your recovery every single day, by the way. No one talks about that. Massive commercialization in a multi-billion-dollar industry that funds lobbyists in this capital and in every state capital in the country, because they want to make money off of our young people's brains. And we don't have to fall into that false dichotomy. I applaud Delegate Lewis for talking about we want to have expungements, and we don't want to give people a lifelong record. Of course we don't. But we can walk and chew gum at the same time and say that while we want to expunge and give second chances and allow you to reintegrate in society for a mistake that you made before, or communities when we don't even have grocery stores that sell fresh vegetables in those communities. That we don't want to have, unfortunately, Baltimore has 8 times as many liquor stores, and I'll talk about alcohol in a minute. I know some of you are thinking, but what about alcohol? I'll get there. Don't worry. 8 times as many liquor stores in poorer communities of color in this country than we do in upper class white communities. And by the way, white folk like to drink too. But there's a targeting by this industry. It's why the opioid epidemic targeted, and it's not even a black or white thing, the opioid epidemic targeted poor whites in Appalachia. You target the most vulnerable people in the addiction business. That's why Big Tobacco for 80 years lied through their teeth with straight faces under oath and said smoking doesn't cause cancer. So the point is, we do addiction for profit very well, and there is a push to reclassify, some of you might have heard this, marijuana to what they call Schedule 3. And it reminds me of the guy that when I gave a speech in front of a high school once, he told me, Kevin, you don't know anything about marijuana. Marijuana is not even addictive. How can you even talk about it? And I said, all right, well, why do you think marijuana is not addictive? And he said, it's not addictive because I can tell you from experience, I use it every single day. And I can tell you, it is definitely not addictive. But I wish I could tell you that lawmakers had more, even most lawmakers had more sense when it came to this, but they have about as much sense, a lot of them, Delegate, you're excluded from that, than this 16-year-old. Because rescheduling marijuana would do a lot of damage. First of all, it would give the marijuana business, which is, by the way, it's federally illegal, a little footnote, but it is illegal. But it would give them a tax break that would allow them to write off expenses like marketing and communications and advertising. I actually think all of you should get a tax break before the weed industry gets a tax break. What about that? I've never called for a tax break I'm not a politician, but that's the first time I did that. Because think about it. Think about how much sense that does not make. That would supercharge corporate marketing budgets and radically expand access to weed in legal states and elsewhere. So we oppose this because we want to put people over profits. We want to put public health over addiction. And we don't think the addiction industrial complex has a place in this country. Corporate tax relief should not drive drug policy, folks. And that's unfortunately what a lot of these folks are pushing for. Big Tobacco and Big Alcohol have already lined up. They want their share too. If you look at the billions that are invested in big marijuana today, a lot of that money comes from Big Alcohol, who sees their profits dwindling at a time when the current younger generation they drink less. We have a little bit more sensibility, which is good. I say we. I'm part of that younger generation, by the way. I promise. I was worried when we were talking about the 50th anniversary what that was going to mean for those of us approaching that age. But the reality is, folks, Big Alcohol wants a piece. Big Tobacco wants a piece. And it's not just big business pushing, it's celebrities, A-listers. It's the biggest podcaster in this country, the biggest former fighter, a boxer in this country. It's the biggest artists. They all stand to make money, just like the actors did in the 50s and 60s and politicians did from tobacco. They stand to make money from the mass corporatization of weed. It would open the door to more of this advertising, which of course is aimed at disadvantaged communities, prolonging marijuana-induced mental health disorders. And this is off script, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but you do your own research of every single mass casualty event we've had in this country over the last 15 years. You find what one of, not the only, common denominator was yourself, and you're going to be very surprised when you see that, including this last one. We need to wake up about the impact that high potency, today's supercharged, genetically bred, genetically altered marijuana is doing with the levels of THC. If you use marijuana 10, 20, 30 years ago, I'm talking about a different drug. You don't know what I'm talking about. And then people say, what about alcohol? And it's like, really? That's our example? That's our great inspiration and aspiration, is that we have to treat something like something else just because that something else happens to be culturally accepted. That's like saying my headlights are completely busted, so you know what? I'm going to break my taillights too, just to be consistent. We need to be consistent. Folks, alcohol is the #1 drug for health disparities, criminal justice. There are more people arrested for alcohol-related impairment, alcohol-related use, alcohol-related violence than all illegal drugs combined. Why is that? It's because it's been embedded in our culture for, a little more than 5,000 years. So we are stuck with it, but it doesn't need to be our example. We can do better than that. So when it comes to all these new drugs, people are talking about psychedelics. You're hearing about that now, right? That's the new thing. All of a sudden, Wow, it's great to know that psychedelic mushrooms are going to cure you for your addiction. Or no, then they said, no, it's going to be some other drug, some other psychedelic drug. And so it's about corporatization, folks. It's addiction for profit. Look behind every single person making this claim, including researchers, see where they're funded from, see what massive billionaires are behind them, see who backs them from everywhere from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. And you'll see that we need to get rid of this false choice between locking people up and letting big business run the show. I think we can do better than that. We've allowed myths to replace facts in this great marijuana debate in this country, and great debate when it comes to these other substances. You know, when you legalize and commercialize any substance, harm increases because of the social and economic forces that are happening. So it's not just the pharmacology, the law and culture matter too. We've seen this on and on and on. And so that's why it's important that we focus not just on one drug or another, but that we do see when these drugs are popping up as all of a sudden wellness alternatives. You know what the biggest fastest growing wellness alternative is, targeted right at you, is something called gas station heroin or kratom. How many people know about that? That's also supposed to completely cure you, by the way. That's what they're saying. The reality is it can kill you, and it is killing people every day. Hundreds of people have died in the last year because of kratom. And these families are paying the ultimate price. It's the families of Ethan Pope, a 20-year-old man who was told kratom would help him get off opioids. He died in Kansas from the toxicity from the active ingredient in kratom that was found by the coroner. Crystal Talavera, a Florida mother, because there you can buy it at the gas station. And even though public health authorities have been sounding alarm for this for years, you know, we have a tendency not to listen to public health authorities. We listen to, you know, who's trending. I wish that the average American would read the annals of the American Medical Association every night before going to bed instead of doom scrolling, but that's not the reality we live in. So kratom is the alcohol alternative. It's the opium alternative. There are millions of dollars in lawsuits happening now as a result of that and what's happening. And we hear about these relapses. You hear about these relapses in the rooms in AA and NA. And that's because kratom is treated like a loophole, but it's really just another trap, just like so many of these other drugs are. Because if a drug can mimic an opioid and destabilize recovery and hide behind the word herbal, that's my favorite part. By the way, you know what else is herbal? Poison ivy. Recovery, but we're gonna keep fighting for your second chance so it's not undermined by a gas station bottle or a glossy, sober ad. You know better than anyone in this town what addiction feels like, what recovery requires. I know many of you have lost loved ones and people inside and outside of the rooms to opioid and alcohol. Some of you have seen what high-potency weed can do for schizophrenia and psychosis and psychotic rages. You know that a sober environment isn't created by accident. It's built through boundaries, accountability, and support. So, you know this, but I'll repeat it. The facts are on your side. Oxford houses are self-run and self-supporting. They produce higher rates of employment and custody regained than any other aftercare program in this country. And these are the truths I've learned from you, because we've learned that real freedom, let's be honest here, is the ability to say no to something that once controlled your whole being. It's not the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want, because it feels good. That's not freedom. Every time your house holds a meeting, you are practicing these ideals. Every time a resident picks up a phone when another alcoholic or addict needs help, instead of picking up a bottle, you are exercising that freedom. Every time you throw a house barbecue, celebrate sobriety anniversary, you are showing that joy doesn't require intoxication. You are going against the norm in this country that we've created, that entertainment is intoxication. You are living proof that that's not true. And these small acts add up. They create a culture where kids grow up seeing sobriety as normal, where neighbors see people in recovery as assets, not liabilities, and where policymakers see community-driven solutions that deserve investment. Who takes out the trash when no one's watching? I've tried to convince my wife of that, but she doesn't believe me. But that ethos is contagious. That's why I'm saying this. It challenges the lie that people with addiction can't govern themselves. It challenges the lie that people with addiction have no self-determination. It challenges the lie that recovery is for the few. It challenges the lie that the only solution is an injection site here, a clean needle over there, and not real treatment. Oxford House is proof that there is another way. Now, as simple as this sounds, obviously it's not about just flipping a switch. It requires a comprehensive approach. It does require keeping dangerous drugs off of our streets. This is another false dichotomy we've been caught into. Supply or demand, which one matters? Both matter. We can do both. We have to ensure we have evidence-based treatments. That includes medications for some, of course, for those who need them. But the other pillars like recovery, prevention, community reintegration, second chances, those cannot be afterthoughts. Stable housing like what Recovery House offers, or what Oxford House offers, provides job opportunities, a surrounding culture that celebrates sobriety rather than glamorizes intoxication. And it comes with accountability. How many of you think accountability is important to your sobriety? So we need employers that understand hiring as someone in recovery is not an act of charity, it's an investment in resilience. We need schools that teach the real consequences of drugs. It's facts over fear, and don't worry, the facts are plenty scary. We need parents who model substance-free coping. You know, every time I see the Today Show focus on weed moms, or now it's mushroom moms. I mean, every year it's something else. Well, why don't we talk about how we can cope without these substances? They're called natural highs. They're all around us. We need churches, mosques, temples, community organizations to open their doors to support groups and not hide. That's where the stigma and shame comes from, and we need to bust those barriers. This is an ecosystem of prevention and recovery. This is your ecosystem, which truly bends the curve of addiction, and Oxford House shows us that that can work. Somebody once told me we absolutely in this field need to have fear, but that fear stands for face everything and recover. And I am confident that together we can do all of that. Happy 50th birthday. We're with you. We stand with you. We love you. Have an awesome conference. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks.